Canada is a really big country, and there can be some big differences when it comes to our real estate markets. If we compare Toronto to Vancouver, Vancouver to Saskatoon, massive differences. And so when we hear national headlines explaining that there's a slowdown in Canadian real estate, it might not be indicative of what's happening here locally. This week on the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast, I'm joined by Chris Garrett as she helps differentiate the difference between our different Canadian real estate markets, gives us an insight into what's happening here currently in Saskatchewan and some of the current inventory challenges. And stick around to the very end of the episode as we have a special announcement strictly for podcast listeners for an upcoming event that they have. Hope you enjoy.
This is the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast, your home for all things Saskatchewan, all things real estate. Very interesting times in the real estate market right now. We are starting to see interest rates come down, but continued inventory challenges makes things interesting in Saskatchewan. And we see a lot of headlines coming out of Toronto, Vancouver about home sales slowing down. And I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to sit down with CEO of the Saskatchewan Realtors Association, Chris Garrett, and help us to get an idea of what's happening in Saskatchewan. And also, she's going to have a really cool announcement. And if you're a longtime podcast listener, you're going to want to stick around for the announcement. So Chris, off to you. Thank you so much for coming back to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I follow your podcast, so kudos to you. And I was really excited to come back. So thanks for the invite.
Wonderful. Happy to hear that you're a listener as well. That's always exciting. Walk us through, Chris, just to kick us off right off the bat with current home sales in Saskatchewan. And do we have any kind of insights or highlights from different communities as we kind of take a peek at those?
Yeah, well, the story is the same. Sometimes I feel like a broken record. It's inventory, inventory, inventory. This is what we're really feeling in Saskatchewan. And I know across the country as well, but now that we're seeing things changing across the country a little bit, we're still feeling that pressure here in Saskatchewan. So overall in Saskatchewan, we have just over 3 months of supply. But when you start doing a dive into our two large urban centers, Regina and Saskatoon, we're looking at about a month and a half of supply, which is really not a comfortable place to be in. And on top of that, our sales continue to outperform every month. So 2024 is really starting to unbox as a year that is pushing the limits of inventory, pushing the limits of sales. And the story there is I think people are still looking for homes. Affordability is still very much an issue. But because there's so much pressure on that inventory, the stats for June 2024 showed that Saskatoon had a record price for benchmark price, and that is now into the 400,000s. The July numbers are not out yet, but they will be shortly in a few days, and I suspect that's even higher. We had 6 communities with record benchmark prices, so that's completely indicative of the pressure that the inventory is feeling.
And so, yeah, not even just focusing on those major markets, but even if we go out to the secondary markets, even as I follow it, I see large price increases in places like Melfort, kind of like my home stomping ground, and homes across the province are getting more expensive.
Yeah, and I suspect even for the July numbers, we're going to see markets like Moose Jaw, smaller, just outside our large urban centers, that are going to start feeling just that same amount of pressure. So absolutely, this is not a story that is unique to the urban communities. It's really something that we're feeling across the province. Gone are the days where people could say there were empty homes here and there that were available. You don't see that anymore. So really, housing, as I said, the pressure on the inventory is real.
Juxtapose this when we're talking about some of Canada's larger markets right now, as they're starting to be seeing a slowdown in some of their price sectors. Now, like their single family homes, they might still be level, but the condo market, especially in places like Toronto and Vancouver, really slowing down. And I think what's interesting with media is a story comes out about Canadian real estate, but it's not quite indicative of what's happening here locally. Walk us through the difference that you would see between a Saskatchewan versus an Ontario versus a British Columbia.
Yeah, well, you know this, Ron. Housing is extremely local, right? It is dependent on the local economy, on the jobs, on the investments that are here, the population growth. There's a number of factors that influence housing, and there's a number of factors that influence housing price, from red tape to supplies to government. And so in Saskatchewan, I think the one piece that stands out for Saskatchewan is we are one of the most affordable places in the country. And I know that falls really flat for individuals that are still really struggling to find appropriate housing. But when you compare Saskatchewan to other countries, especially on other provinces, sorry, especially Ontario and BC, we're extremely affordable here. So this is a place where if you're looking to move and you're looking across the country and like, where can I actually afford to buy a home? Saskatchewan's it, right? And so I think that's why we're seeing more pressure here. What's really interesting is we are not a market typically in Saskatchewan that reacts or feels policy changes very quickly. Great example, when we have interest rate hikes or dips, uh, municipalities like Toronto, Vancouver, even Halifax will really feel that. You can see it in the statistics of sales. Here, it takes longer. I think that speaks to how resilient we are in Saskatchewan here, but we won't see that. So that's why in Toronto right now, you're seeing in the news that, you know, their sales are hitting 26-year lows or 27-year lows. Here, we're still reporting 10% above average. You know, the sales are still happening here. So I actually think it'll be the reverse. When we see more interest rate cuts, we're going to actually see more activity and more sales, which unfortunately for us is going to put even more pressure on that inventory. So we function very differently here. I mean, even when you compare our single family homes to our condos, again, very, very different.
And different economies within the same country. If you look at Ontario, a lot of manufacturing. In Saskatchewan, we're a major exporter. And those are, you know, as far as we'll pick on agriculture, a very steady industry as far as the growth in that. And a lot of our markets have a big agriculture based on that. And that does tend to help temper things along with that. Do you folks follow different things like that as far as economics and how things roll on that side?
Yeah, absolutely. And how even the commercial real estate is tied to residential, and when we're seeing those investments and we know when they'll flow back and forth. So absolutely. And that's also largely tied to the resiliency of the real estate market here. It's a good investment to buy a home or be a housing provider in Saskatchewan. That works really well here. But again, it's out of reach for a lot of people. You know, it's interesting because we have affordability, but if you're looking to buy a house, you can't just go out there and find something this month. You're going to require several months. You're going to require a lot of patience. There's multiple offers out there right now, and even for those who are selling their home, it's not an easy process because there's so many people interested. I don't know if you saw the numbers recently, Ron, but Saskatoon and Regina saw some of the highest price increases so far in 2024 when it comes to single family homes and condo prices. You know, Saskatoon, especially, third place across the country and sixth place, respectively, for both. And so that is concerning. You know, we're 9 times the national average on price increases on homes. So my main concern right now is I know we're resilient, I know we're affordable, but that can go away very, very quickly if we're not careful and if we don't get more inventory out there.
And let's lead right into that. Inventory, obviously a challenge here. What needs to happen to help resolve this issue? Obviously, building becomes an obvious one, but are there any other strings that we can pull to help address inventory challenges?
Yeah. I've always said we build great houses here in Saskatchewan. We have great builders who know how to build homes. You know, take a look at the weather that we have here, right? And those homes are going up and very resilient in that as well. So we know how to do it. So the question is more, how can we get out of the way? How can governments get out of the way to let that happen. And so there's a number of really interesting policies that have happened in the past 6 months that we're watching closely, because I'm hopeful that they will have a significant impact in the market to, one, reduce red tape, right? And two, reduce expenses. And that's happened at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. So you'll probably remember there was a GST rebate federally on multi-units. Province matched that up with a PST rebate on single family homes. And, both municipalities in Regina and Saskatoon recently voted on the Housing Accelerator Fund, which was tied to significant changes in zoning bylaws, which was not comfortable. But I will say this. It speaks volumes to me that our municipalities were not able to get there on their own. They kind of had to have their hands forced. And yes, that's uncomfortable, but it'll be interesting to see the impacts of all those policies onto the housing market and the inventory numbers.
I've gotten two big questions lately. One is always, what are interest rates doing? But number two, a lot of people are asking my perspective on those regulation changes and on those zoning. And it is very interesting that there are two, I think, valid sides to it, where you have people who maybe they don't want to live beside a fourplex and they've been established and they want to keep, infrastructure the way it is. But as we're talking about it right now, there are significant inventory challenges, and something does need to change in order to help more building take place. And so, six of one, half a dozen of another. But as far as the inventory challenge goes, I think that is positive news.
Yeah, I box it into two different. I mean, we could talk about that specific topic for a very long time, but I try to leave those discussions with two general buckets. One, all of those changes, yes, they're harsh and they're large and they're very uncomfortable. And you know what? There's a lot of unknown, and that unknown gets filled with fear. I agree. But any new development still has to follow the development regulations in the city, which are tremendous. So just because we're removing some of those regulations doesn't mean that any lot that's going to happen. There's still a lot of different red tape and components in there that have to be followed. And the second piece is we expect our municipalities to be run like businesses. They need to make smart financial decisions. And just like you have a business, we expect to be very efficient with our dollars, increase the revenue that you get and decrease the spending that you have, make it super efficient. That's what these regulations are about. They're really about planning properly to be efficient. But it doesn't mean that we're going to see a fourplex going up everywhere.
Correct. Well said. Obviously, people love to be involved with real estate and love to get connected with folks just like you. And let's take that to the amazing announcement that is coming up here, and just walk us through the event that you guys are hosting coming up.
Well, we host State of Real Estate every year, and people ask me, what's State of Real Estate? And it's everything having to do with Saskatchewan real estate and where are we at today, what's coming down in the future, what should we be doing as a community? Because, we're the Saskatchewan Realtors Association, and, we're a big player. We serve those professionals in the market, but real estate is very large, right? From commercial, farm, residential, from, mortgage brokers to even appraisers, that like the real estate world, that real estate universe, if I can call it that way, is quite large. So this event is really intended for anybody who dabbles in real estate or who wants to know more. So this year it's in Saskatoon on September 26th. We have some amazing speakers with a variety of backgrounds. And so we have Lisa Picardo from T360 in the US. So she's going to come talk about insights in real estate with her firm. And we have David Coletto. I know you know David Coletto. He's a top Canadian polling firm. He's very well respected. He's going to come and he's going to share some data that he's done for Saskatchewan. And we're going to share that for the first time at the State of Real Estate. And you know what? I could share more. One last one, Kathleen Black with the Shift movement on really like, how do you power your business? How do you become efficient and meet your potential? So she's going to inspire us a little bit for that. And Ron, I have a special announcement for you. So for your listeners, and to say thank you for inviting us to your podcast, um, we're offering a promo code called RON10. And so for anybody who does want to sign up, any of your listeners, they can just go to sra.ca, find the State of Real Estate page, buy a ticket, put in your code, and then you can get 10%.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that offer, Chris. And I really appreciate you offering that to listeners. And I think people who do follow the podcast, you get a lot of variety of people who do kind of tune into this. But I think they're the exact type of people who are looking for more insight. And I attended last year, and the one takeaway that I had is it's always great to have people who can take a 10,000-foot view of the province. And you're talking to some really high level people who have these amazing data points and such an excitement about Saskatchewan and lots of positive, great news about what's happening here. And I think sometimes when you're working in it 9 to 5, day after day, you kind of lose that magic. And it's so great to have these speakers come in and really fill your real estate ego to say, like, things are really great here. So I'm really looking forward to coming on, and thank you so much for putting that offer out. I think that's it for now, Chris. Anything else you wanted to chat about as far as the event goes, or just go buy your tickets and we'll see you there?
Yeah, and we'll see you there. We the more the better, because that's how we build community here. In terms of, there is a real estate community out there. So the more people out there, the more diverse our people attending. It'll be a much better conference.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. I hope you liked it, found some value here. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button. 2 things before you go. Number 1, if you'd like the chance to win your mortgage payment, simply recommend me as a mortgage broker. The person you recommend, if I do a discovery call with them, you can win up to $2,500 for a win your mortgage payment or to cover off your rent. Simply recommend me as a mortgage broker and you're entered into the draw. Secondly, the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast is teaming up with the Saskatchewan Realtors Association as they host the State of Real Estate coming up in September. If you'd like a discount on your ticket, simply enter promo code RON10 when you're buying your ticket, and we'll see you there. Until next week, I'm Ron Caroni, your Saskatchewan mortgage professional. Bye for now.